Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast, presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in.
Welcome to another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. I'll be your host, Jason Campbell, business development leader here at Strategic Treasurer. And joining me today for another great conversation is the man, the myth, the legend, our managing partner, Craig Jeffery. Craig, welcome to the show.
It's good to talk about these different topics in our comfortable studio here. We love our new studio, which makes recording so easy. Maybe
it should be my opening, like live in Peachtree City. Of course, this is a podcast, Peachtree City, Georgia, home of the golf carts, right? So, but yes, in our lovely studio here that we have.
Recorded remotely and edited to take out silly things. Yes.
Silly things to make this podcast more serious. All right. Well, Craig, listen, I'm so excited to have the opportunity to speak with you as always. And hopefully our listeners the same way as we learn, again, some more interesting topics and related to the world of Treasury. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about visibility to leverage and, really kind of go into talking about the progression of capabilities for Treasury moves from visibility to insight to leverage or the ability to act. So, and let's kind of kick this off with this, one wonderful question here. In what ways is this a mindset, and in what way is this a roadmap for organizations?
Yeah. So, when we talk about things like visibility or insight or leverage, these are some of the differences. I mean, I'll give you a few examples from our day-to-day life. On the wall you have a thermostat and a thermometer. A thermometer tells you what the temperature is. The thermostat allows you to, adjust it up or down to make it cooler, to make it warmer. And so you're controlling the environment. And so to one extent, the thermostat allows you the leverage. You're changing the environment based on the action you do. Whereas the thermometer is like, it's giving you feedback. Here's what's going on. It's like, oh, that's why I feel so hot, or that's why it's cold, or now I need to do something. Usually the information or the visibility tells you, things are fine. It gives you feedback. So, things are fine. Things need to be adjusted, and you can take whatever remediation effort that you want to do. And so that's a difference when we think about visibility. I can see. Insight is, what does this mean? And then leverage or the ability to act is how can I make changes to what goes on? So that's an example, the thermostat, thermometers, visibility, and leverage. When we look at, an example about insight is, on your car, you have a tachometer. I guess if you don't have an electric car, I don't know. I don't have an electric car, so I don't know. But you have a tachometer that shows how many RPMs the engine is running. And so you can have visibility to that. But there's also information and scale. Like it will give you warnings if you're redlining. Like there's a section that it's red, right? A light may flash on that tells you you're going too high, shift to another gear, don't burn out your engine. There's insight as to what that means with a tachometer. Same thing with like a gas gauge. It's like, okay, I can see that I'm almost on empty. And what does that mean? It's like, and then a light goes on. It says, get fuel. Those are some areas that give you insight. Of course, you still have to pull over and put fuel in or charge or whatever you're doing. So those are the three terms. Visibility is, what can I see at a granular level or with stratification? And so in Treasury, we think about that. Where's my money? What currency? What bank accounts? What banks? What countries? So all these, different ways of cutting the information in different dimensions allows me to see that. But you can also see that in the cash conversion cycle, for receivables, payables. Age has a factor on it. What jurisdiction are they in? What are the typical collection terms? As examples of, now I have more insight, and then perhaps I can make a forecast. And then we think about leverages. What can I do to change what the outcome is? Like, oh, it's great. We're going to run out of money in 42 days if we don't do something different. And then what's the leverage? Oh, I can tap a line. I can slow down my payables. I can increase sales. I can sell something. I have a bit. I can import a program for supply chain finance, which gives me the ability to stretch out my terms more, yet let people collect funds sooner, And now that bought me 50 more days of liquidity. So like, okay, that's well within the comfort zone. I'm looking at a new credit facility or issuing some bonds or notes for that. So it's a visibility, insight, leverage, different terms that mean something different.
Yeah, it's and all great analogies to put them in perspective. And the thing I was thinking was is like, these are all, you look for indicators, right? And just anything, and your job function itself, you're looking for those indications that say, is your direction that you're heading appropriate? What action should you take? And you're foreseeing what's going to happen, right? So, and that's where it comes into that visibility. As you were talking about the thermometer, which absolutely, the mercury rises with the temperature for a reason, but it's also that gives you the indicator of how do you need to dress for that day or be prepared for that day. Do you need to prepare for, long sleeve shirts? Do you need to prepare for shorts? And also too, as your visibility is looking outside, it's like, is there clouds in the sky? Well, are they gray? Then is there a chance of rain that you need to take and be prepared? And even if you don't know, right? Because it's like being a meteorologist. I think meteorologist is one of those jobs where as long as you're 50% right, you get to keep it, right? And it's like, but if they're saying, hey, it's a 50% chance of rain, probably a good chance I need an umbrella. I may need it, may not need it, but I have it there just in case as a secure safety factor, as a precaution. And man, it's the same thing when you think about visibility, insight, and leverage, right? You're already having that plan put out in place, and we'll get into a little bit more here in a second, but you're already starting to see what that steps are going to look like and how to be prepared and how to ensure that you're maximizing those opportunities that apparently are going to be out in front of you. Or if there's disaster ahead, you're already making the proper plans and putting them in place to make sure that you can make it through. And going into talking about that mindset, because that's really what it is, right? It's that mindset and the roadmap and those two pieces. So let's talk about those, explain the difference besides specificity.
Specificity.
Thank you. I can't even. I'm so tongue tied on that. Yeah, that word.
Specificity.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, that word there. That'd be great.
So the mindset and a roadmap. The mindset is, what's the concept here? I realized that there's three different aspects to what I need to do. One, I need to know what goes on and what's happening. So that's visibility. The second is, what does that mean? How does that alter what I should do? Or does that give me confidence in what I'm doing is right? And so that's the insight element. And then leverage is like, how do I influence what's going on? Whether it's your foot on the pedal, or it's your finger on the thermostat, or your mouse on the terms in your supply chain financing program. That's how I can leverage things. So I think the mindset is, I need all three of these. There's purposes for each of these, and there's value in each of these, and each one becomes more important. I can't, leverage is harder to use if I don't have good visibility. If I don't know what to do, how do I act properly? So I need all three, but it's like, it's this progression up from visibility to insight to pulling on the levers that I have. And how long are those levers, right? The longer the lever, the more powerful it is for my organization, because it has a bigger impact. And I won't give the quote about if I had the longest lever, with the long enough lever, you could move the earth. But the idea that how much you can move things, how many days, how much capital, how you can capture your risk management exposures and alter those is very, very efficient. So that's the overall mindset is, I need these three to accomplish it. The roadmap is, where am I now and what do I need to do to have all three in place and have the right things in place with leverage? So, can I see all my accounts, all my balances, all my transactions every day globally? And do I have the ability to see this in different dimensions, different views? The example again is by country, by bank, by currency, by pool, by entity, whatever those views are, I need to see that. And that's just talking about currency, but I may need much more visibility. And so a roadmap is, standard is, I need to see all my balances, prior day balances, and detailed transactions across the globe. That's the minimum standard. So roadmap is, put that in place. The second part of the roadmap is, how do I achieve insight? Like, what are my decision points? Like, what exposure level is too much for interest rate risk or foreign currency volatility? It's like, these currency pairs, if it's the potential swing from the past 5 months of highest peak volatility. If that's over 5 million, I need to bring it down under 5 million. And so there's an insight into what matters to us and what the size is of the volatility in this case. So the ability to see, just like in the room, it's like if it's under 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or if it's below 0 degrees Celsius, my pipes might freeze. So I can't turn the thermostat off in the winter. I need to have it on because there's a freezing element. If I leave it too high and I live in a humid climate, the air system won't filter out the moisture and I'll get mold. And so there's what are the insights, in the house in that case, but what level of liquidity becomes too tight? What are my minimum standards there so that I know to look at? What happens if I'm going to be within 5% of breaking a covenant on my credit facility? What's the negative implications of if I break the covenant facility? Lack of trust, possible, calling of the note, or, most likely substantial penalties for doing that, or higher rates kicking in, and maybe not able to do an acquisition that you're planning. So knowing what the insight is, where are we redlining? What's the point before redlining? Where are we redlining? And where do things break? And so that idea of knowing those levels of insight, and that's a crucial part of that. Same thing on leverage. How do I make my lever longer? The example might be, we put a supply chain finance program in place. We do a dynamic discounting type program. Those work better when there's a longer period of time. Let's say you extended everything out to 60 days, for paying, but it takes you 30 days to get approval. Well, now your lever can work in that 30-day period. Like instead of paying on day 60, they can collect it on day 30. Well, that's a certain value. What if you get all of the approvals done in 10 days? And then you can offer it, maybe using other people's money. You can offer your recipients, your vendors, the ability to take money 10 days after they've shipped and invoiced. And so they've got a 50-day lever that they can pull. Now that's more valuable to them, and it could be more valuable to you from the value of the program. And so that's a key part in understanding those differences. How do I know what's going on? What are the key measurements, warning tracks, red lines, margins that I have to be careful with, as an alert, as a serious warning, as this were not to exceed such and such a number, whether it's risk, debt, liquidity, exposures, and so on. So those are some of the things that I would say you need to think about.
It's funny, you brought up an analogy earlier about, the electric car, right? That you're like, I don't have an electric car, your car itself. And you think about as technology has changed, right? It's kind of goes back to the old saying, it's not your grandfather's Treasury world anymore, right? Because there's so many different things that come into play. And, it's funny when I get my vehicle to my wife's vehicle, she has all the bells and whistles, the sensors and the bird's eye views and all these cameras and everything that it does the sensor. My vehicle, nothing. I know when I hit something. That's it. Like I know I was too close because I put a dent in my car or I did something else, because this technology has changed so much. And it's like the computers inside these vehicles are telling you exactly what's going on and what's going on within your vehicle itself, and when things need to be serviced, things are not right or off, or versus, like I used to have to wake up and go look at my tire and put my foot on it to see if I had, how much resistance I had to know if I need to put air in it or not, where now I can just get in and it tells you the tire pressure, right? And so when I was thinking about when you're talking about road mapping itself and has things have changed and the options that are available for folks to increase visibility, insight, and leverage the tools, the resources, the things that are out there support-wise, organizations like Strategic Treasury and other organizations are out there who can help firms also to help with their road mapping. I was thinking like, how does one start off like building a roadmap with so many valuable options and things that are out there for an organization that says, it's probably time for us to check ourselves, and are we putting ourselves in the best position to know exactly what's going on, because it is about speed. We can see, as you were talking about market volatility and as things happen overnight, and there's things with warning and there's things without warning, and what's our readiness level for, something to make good moves or things that are going to potentially be some bad things going down the way. And I was just thinking to myself, with all these things that are going on, how does one build that roadmap?
Yeah, so there's a number of components to a roadmap. Besides saying what level do I achieve the visibility I need, what areas do I need visibility to, what are the dimensions I need to be able to see it, what's the time frame for that, and the frequency that could be updated. What insight do I have? What insight do I need to have captured, and then how do I lever that? When I think about the feedback, you talked about the car, and you can tell when you're close to someone. Whenever I travel, and if I'm using a rental car, sometimes they have these helpful aids, right? That sense, oh, you're close to the line. And I've gotten in cars sometimes where it must have it gives you so much room before the line that the steering wheel is buzzing constantly left to right. You moved 1 inch over and it's buzzing. It's like, okay, that's useless. I'm getting warnings for everything, which means I'm going to ignore it. Just like you have a faulty smoke alarm and it just keeps going off. What do people do? They pull out the batteries, right? That's not the right answer, but too many false negatives means that nothing matters, right? You're just like, this can't be real. Okay, that's the 15th time that alarm's gone off this past week. I'm going to sleep through it, to our detriment. So we want to make sure that the insight we have, that the warnings, the red lines, the alerts, et cetera, are sounding the right scale of alarm. But when we think about the roadmap, I think about the team. What does the team do? What mindset does the team have? I also think about technology. What technology is in place to capture the information, to systematize the insight we need to have, like what's an alert, what's a warning, what's the endpoint, so that we're not just like reacting to over limit, overexposed, and then it's like, okay, how do we fix a problem? Like, I'd like to know a little bit more when I'm close to the margin, what's occurring, and then not finally, but the other piece besides technology is structures. What are the cash management structures that we have in place, the financial structures we have in place to help us solve our challenges with visibility, achieving accurate insight, and then levering things. So with that, the team is different people in your organization probably have different strengths according to these categories of visibility, insight, and knowing how to leverage what we can leverage. But making sure the team has the right mindset of knowing that there's this progression and that the team has the ability to use the technology to have proper information, good information, accurate information, and then set it up so that on a more automated basis, we're getting the alerts, the heads-up display, the warning light on our dashboard when those things matter. If all of them pop on all the time, you ignore them, right? It's like, okay, your tire's flat. Well, the sensor's bad. Like, the tire's not flat. After 50 times, it's like, I'm going to ignore the red lights because they're not going to make sense. So this idea of how do I put in technology in place that gives me the right type of alerts, the right types of warnings and information that I can act on. On the structure standpoint is designing your banking structure so that it's a modern cash management structure. You use a header account or cash concentration structure for commercial size entities and larger. Very small companies may have to look at different things. They may not be able to use structures. Maybe they have a single operating account per country. Everything goes in and out of account. Well, that works fine. It doesn't make sense to have 3, 4, 5, 10 accounts when you have very, very limited activity. But as you grow, then you isolate those. And that provides some additional guidance and insight. You can see all of your inbound flows, your outbound flows, track and capture potential fraud or errors more readily, across the board from a macro look, not just from a detailed reconciliation look. So how do you build the roadmap? You look at where do we want to be from a visibility perspective, insight, and leverage, if those are 3 waypoints. And then what does that look like and what do we need to get there? And so there's a flow for team development and responsibility, but what tech do I need to see my exposures, to see my see my assets, my balances, my transactions, and then what do I need to do longer term from a structural standpoint, from a bank relationship and account side?
Well, once you got that roadmap built, get in the car and drive. That's what I'm talking about. Well, Craig, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in to another great episode. And really this one, learning about visibility, insight, and leverage within your treasury functions. And Craig, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. And to our listeners, if you got any comments or questions or anything else you'd like to hear from us, please feel free to drop us a note at podcast@strategictreasurer.com. And until next time, take care.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.